Happy Snowy Groundhog Day! I decided to create this video so we could cover some of the missed content by missing two Monday night classes. I'm teaching two sections of ECPK 320 this semester, so I'll talk in the video about either my Bridgewater section or the Cape section when referring to assignments. For example, today, the Bridgewater section would engage in a dialogue on chapters 1 and 2, and the Cape section discussed these chapters last week on Blackboard. I expect that the Bridgewater students will submit their completed dialogue tables to Blackboard by 6 p.m. tonight. Cape students will discuss Chapter 4 in Otto and Chapter 1 in Epstein this week on Blackboard. I expect that all Cape students will respond to the thread by tomorrow, Tuesday, at midnight. So, what is ECPK 320 all about? It's about language development and early literacy. This video will explain some of the key terms used throughout the course. So let's begin. What is language? Language is a medium of communication with others and within us. It's an essential component of any culture. It's the foundation of our perceptions, communications, and daily interactions, and it is a symbol by which we categorize, organize, and clarify our thinking. These would be discussion questions if we were sitting in class and looking at each other. The Cape students discussed some of these questions last week. Let's begin with the first question. How do speech and language differ? Speech and language are tools that humans use to communicate or share thoughts, ideas, and emotions. Language is a set of rules shared by individuals who are communicating that allows them to exchange thoughts, ideas, or emotions. Speech is talking. It is one way that language can be expressed. Language may also be expressed through writing, signing, or even gestures in the case of people who have neurological disorders and may depend on eye blinks or mouth movements to communicate. Well, there are many languages in the world. I've heard up to 7,000. Each includes its own set of rules for phonology, in the case of speech, or in sign language, phonology would correspond to hand shapes, morphology, which is word formation, syntax, which is sentence formation, semantics, word and sentence meaning, prosody, intonation and rhythm of speech, and pragmatics, which is the effective use of language. On the screen is a definition of language acquisition. Language allows humans to construct complex and mutually serving social compacts and relationships for work and play. The human brain is uniquely designed to create, teach, learn, and use language. All human societies share a strong desire to see that their offspring acquire the ability to learn and use language as quickly as possible. So, what is language? Language has 5 components. The first is phonology. Next is semantics. Then we have syntax, morphology, and pragmatics. Let me make this bigger so you can see the words. So, phonology includes the sounds and prosody of language. Semantics can be thought of as vocabulary. Syntax is word order or grammar. Morphology is word structure based on roots, prefixes, and suffixes. And pragmatics is the social and contextual context of language, such as conversation skills and registers. What is literacy? This chart shows a framework of literacy that's also used in the Common Core state standards, which Massachusetts has adopted. And this is the curriculum learning standards that teachers from preschool through grade 12 use in the area of literacy. So literacy includes two components. You have oral language and written language, as well as receptive language and expressive language. The four skills children develop are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Chapter 2 in Otto discusses learning and language. How do we make sure that infants develop language? And why is it so important? Let's look at that further. In Chapter 2, Otto reviews 4 of the major theories of language acquisition. I'll begin by explaining the 2 theories that focus on nature. The first nature-focused theory is Chomsky's nativist theory, which emphasizes inborn or innate human capabilities. Noam Chomsky is the major theorist of this perspective. Major emphasis is on acquisition of syntactic knowledge or grammar, and he explains this by a universal grammar or language acquisition device which is inborn in humans. As Otto stated, Chomsky focused on the syntactic area of language. The human brain contains a predefined mechanism, or universal grammar, that is the basis for the acquisition of all language. The brain is partially programmed machine ready to be configured. In other words, the human brain contains the basic structures needed to learn any language, an inborn universal grammar. The language acquisition device is an innate system for picking up language that permits children, as soon as they have vocabulary, to combine those words into grammatically correct sentences. Chomsky also stated that language, besides being inborn, does depend on external events. The cognitive developmentalists look more at maturation rather than an inborn mechanism for language learning. They also focus more on the word level than the grammatical level of language knowledge. Language is acquired as maturation occurs and the cognitive competencies develop. Jean Piaget is the major theorist of this perspective. He did not believe in a unique language learning mechanism as Chomsky proposed. Likely you are familiar with this chart from your child development course that you took, which was a prerequisite for this course. The important things to remember in terms of language development that during the sensory motor stage, object permanence and the construction of schemata are particularly important to language development. And during the preoperational stage, symbolic representation becomes the part of Piaget's theory that we use in this course. Piaget's idea was that children learn through action. He believed that children are born with and acquire schemas. As children explore their world, they form and reform ideas in their mind. Why is object permanence important for language learning? Because until children realize that certain objects are permanent, that they exist even when a child's not observing them, it is difficult to get them to consider other concepts like trust or love. As babies understand that sights, sounds, and actions around them, they will place these actions within the context of language. What is the role of environment in development? The two theories that focus more on the environment are the behaviorist perspective and the interactionist perspectives. The behaviorists believe that learning language is due to associations between stimuli, responses, and events following the response. Language is taught through imitative speech and reinforcement. B.F. Skinner is the major theorist in this perspective. B.F. Skinner believed behavior is determined by the reinforcement received by the environment. Many of the CAPE students commented how children learn by imitation. I think it's something that we've all observed at some point in time. The interactionist perspective has an emphasis on the primary role of social cultural interaction in the process of language development. Vygotsky explained that social interaction was essential for language development as seen in his idea of the zone of proximal development. Bruner built on Vygotsky's work, and he coined the term scaffolding, which we still use in teaching. The interactionists have four basic principles. The Vygotskyan perspective of language acquisition emphasizes social interaction and places less emphasis on the stages of behavior. From this perspective, language and cognition emerge in development at about the same time and are interrelated. Children build new concepts by interacting with others who either provide feedback for their hypothesis or help them accomplish a task. Vygotsky suggested that learning is a matter of internalizing the language and actions of others. As the child discusses a problem or task with an adult, the adult supplies language to assist the child in solving the problem. The child gradually internalizes the language until the task can be completed independently. The instructional technique in which the teacher models the desired strategy or task and then gradually shifts responsibility to students is called scaffolding. So, the structure of the language one habitually uses influences the way they perceive the environment. This is cultural relativism, which is also called the Worthian hypothesis, which is something that we're going to talk about throughout the course, is the influence of culture on language. On the next slide is a video to explain this hypothesis. I hope you enjoy watching Professor Arnold from Sinclair Community College in Dayton, Ohio. The video was uploaded to YouTube on February 24th, 2011.
Have you ever been to your local home improvement store to buy paint? Well, recently I was there to buy white paint. And when I went in, I thought I would just go in, ask for white, and leave. But what I found was this. Many kinds of white paint, many different kinds of white. I had no idea that I would expect to find several colors. In choosing paint, I started to look at the colors, and as you might be able to tell, some of those colors are more brown, some of them more grayish. One looked a little purple to me. So in choosing my color, I decided to look at the names that they had given to the paint chips. Some of them were Snowcap White and Bistro White and quail egg white, and I wondered how my choosing white paint was determined by the name that it was given, because some of them I liked and some of them I didn't. Does our language affect how we see the world? Does our language affect how I pick white paint? I think it does. Long ago, there was a researcher and anthropologist by the name of Sapir, and he merged some of his studies with a young linguist by the name of Whorf. Together, they came up with what we now know as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. I believe that the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis explains some of our interpersonal miscommunication. According to Corey Floyd, in his most recent interpersonal communication textbook, he defines the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis as this: language influences the ways that members of a culture see the world. Our language influences the ways that we in a culture see the world. Now, there are two pieces to the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and one sort of unfolds from the other. The first one is called linguistic determinism. I know, it's a huge term. Linguistic determinism. Linguistic determinism is the structure of a language determining how we think. So in essence, our language tells us what to think. Let's think about this in the most easy way. In English, here in America, our language revolves around past, present, and future. And we sort of see the world in past, present, and future. There are languages, for instance, that don't have a future tense. And the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, particularly the determinist view, says that they don't see the world the same way we do, because we have past, present, and future, and they maybe only have past and present. That our language determines how we think. Our language determines how we see the world. Let's go across the world to the Solomon Islands. In the Solomon Islands, there is a culture there which revolves around coconut. It's a high commodity there, coconut. And in the Solomon Islands, they have 9 words for coconut. Actually, they have 9 words which represent each of the stages of growth of a coconut, which they use for particular purposes. In America, we have 1 word for coconut. A coconut is not that highly valued in our society. Linguistic determinism says that my language will determine how I think about it. So in the Solomon Islands, they probably think more importantly, for instance, about coconut than we do in America. Makes sense. The second principle in the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is called linguistic relativism. Because language determines our perceptions of reality, how we see the world, linguistic relativism says people who speak different languages will see the world differently. People who speak different languages will see the world differently. So let's take, for example, this Mandarin culture. There's a word in their society called Lao, L-A-O, and it means respect for the elderly. Now in America, we have the word respect, and we have the word elderly, and we have this concept that we should respect our elders. But in the Mandarin culture, they have a whole word for it. Linguistic relativism says that because they have a word, they will think about it differently than we do when we don't have a word. That different cultures with different languages think differently about a concept, in this case, respect for the elderly. There are even some Sapir-Whorf believers who say because they have a word, they respect their elders better than we can because we don't have the word. Now let me muddy this topic a little bit more. I think it's already heavy and sort of hard to understand by asking you this. Is it that they respect their elders because the word exists in their language? Or does the word exist in their language because they have such respect for their elders? Sort of a chicken or egg theory, and interesting, I think, to think about in terms of our language. Let me give you another example of the linguistic relativism. In the Philippines, they have 92 words for rice. They eat, breathe, live, and sleep rice. Unlike here in America, we basically have one word for rice. We have lots of adjectives to describe it. We have white rice and brown rice and basmati rice, but we don't have 92 words for rice. Linguistic relativism says that they may in fact have more importance on rice because they have so many words for it. Whereas in America, it's not so important. Different languages see the world differently. Do those in the Philippines see rice differently than we do? I think they probably do. Several years ago, I traveled to Cameroon, West Africa. And while I was there, I had the privilege of spending a day with a linguist. And he was telling me about some of his work, and his job was to translate the Bible into the mother tongue, the language of those in a tribe in a very remote area. He said to me that one of the biggest challenges is finding words that matter to these folks. For instance, there's a passage in scripture that says whiter than snow. And he said to me, these folks in Cameroon, they've never seen snow. They don't experience snow. They don't have televisions to know what snow is. They have very few books and even fewer magazines. So his job was to find something in their culture that meant something similar to ours, whiter than snow. Can they not understand the concept if they don't have the word snow in it? A Sapir-Whorf believer says no, they cannot understand snow unless they have the word, the way that we do. There are those who aren't such heavy believers in Sapir-Whorf, and they say, you know, we can still make some words, we can still translate something so that people understand. And that's what this linguist believed. He said, for instance, he might have to choose a phrase like whiter than goat's milk, something that they're very familiar with, so they can understand the concept. So, my last question for you is, who cares? Why do we need to even know about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis? Well, let's think about it. If language does affect how we think, and thinking is our perception, so language affects how we see the world, what our perception of our experience is, what our perception of words that we're hearing, what is our perception? Hasn't it ever happened where you've had a miscommunication with someone you love, your family, your friends, your coworkers, maybe even strangers? Is it possible that that miscommunication is hung up on a difference in perception, which may stem from a difference in language? And it may mean that their language is different because they live in a different part of town. Their language is different because they live in a different part of the country. Or maybe they live in a different country. Or maybe they grew up in a different part of the country. The more diverse our perceptions, the less able we are to have a mutual understanding with each other, which then affects our interpersonal communication. Now let me muddy this water a little bit. What if someone knows 2 languages, or 3 or 4 languages? Wouldn't it stand to reason that the more languages you know, the wider your perception is of life, of experiencing the world? And there again, isn't it possible that we will interact with people, and we probably already do, who know 2 languages, or 3 or 4, and have a very wide perception? Does Sapir-Whorf affect us? Indeed, it does.
We've discussed the theories of language development, but how does this work in infants? Well, first of all, the body is designed for speech. As I stated earlier, the human brain is designed to create, teach, learn, and use language. What is most significant at birth is that the brain is still in the process of doing a lot of dynamic wiring that can be influenced by experience. The circuits in the auditory cortex are wired by age 1. The more words a child hears by 2, the larger the vocabulary will grow. Hearing problems can impair the ability to match letters to sounds. The CAPE students discussed this concept in their discussion, and hopefully I'll be able to discuss this further with the Bridgewater students as well. Specific areas in the brain that are necessary for language development are Broca's and Wernicke's area. And if these are damaged, you would see an impact on language, such as in a stroke victim. What are your thoughts on critical periods for language learning? It looks, according to the chart, that by age 4 is very critical, and even up to age 7. I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Child-directed speech, or parentese, or sometimes it has been called motherese, is important. And I think if you look at the video clip on the next slide, you will see evidence of shared referencing, nonverbal communication in the form of eye contact and looping. I hope you enjoy the video.
Down by 6. Time running
Fourth
out.
and long, he's never gonna make it.
Formation, 4 wide
Come on
outs.
now.
Here comes
Come
the
on.
snap.
Do this for me. Come on now, I need this. Hi, big guy. You wanna join the party?
This is called parentese.
Look at daddy's boy. Look at daddy's boy.
Look at daddy's boy. How's my mighty man?
Babies love it. And this sing-song speech helps them learn language.
Hungry? Yes?
You're my big, strong girl.
This blue. C'est vraiment très
So
joli.
pitch your voice high
This is you, baby.
Is that a nose?
and repeat your words.
Panda bear's nose?
You're helping your baby learn sounds and words.
Go get some spaghetti.
Babies learn sounds and words from you. For more
Researchers haven't fully figured out how the brain hears, extracts, dissects, recognizes, and analyzes speech sounds. Because there is no relationship between the acoustic signal and phonetic segments. For example, say purchase with your hand in front of your mouth and then say the word stop. Purchase. Stop. Does it feel the same? So, what are the context or environments for learning language? First, let's think about the adult characteristics. Sit quietly and think about yourself as a young infant sleeping in a crib. You're destined to grow into a literate preschooler. Here comes someone. You awake. The steps are getting closer. How would you describe this person who will be responsible for your growth and development as a functioning, literate human being? What adult characteristics would you be sure to mention? What are the ones that will determine your level of verbal literacy? As I shared with the CAPE students on Blackboard, this is a chart which summarizes the theories and the teaching implications of those theories. As you can see, we use elements of all of the theories in our teaching practice. hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and as a reminder, I wanted to let the Bridgewater students know to bring an iPad, tablet, or smartphone to class on Monday, February 9th. I'm looking forward to seeing the Cape students again on February 12th in Yarmouth, and in the meantime, I'll see you on Blackboard.